All right, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host, and today we have one of my favorite local bass players, Tony Krasinski, who's also a drummer, and I'm sure you're going to fill us in on all the other instruments that you play, but welcome.
Thanks, Chip.
So we were talking a little bit earlier. The podcast goes to 1990. You played a lot in the 1980s, and we're going to cover a lot of that, but we should point out that, of course, you are still playing today. You just retired from Erie Insurance after
30 years.
30 years. Awesome. You have a studio at home. You never really stopped playing. I mean, all those years, even raising kids, right?
Right. Well, yeah, when the kids were little, I stopped playing live, but I had the studio.
Gotcha.
So I always wrote songs and always recorded.
Right.
I think I had a dry spell, maybe in the 2000s or something where I didn't do a lot. But when COVID hit, I started working from home.
Sure.
I rejuvenated the studio.
Right. Well, then you recently just joined Cherry Bomb, like we were talking about, a local band that plays out. So you are a busy man these days, even though you're retired. But we're going to go back to the beginning. First of all, your last name, Krasinski. There's a heck of a lot of you Krasinskis in town. I lose track of who's related to who. I know you and Dave are brothers.
We're all, me and Dave and Bill.
Are
all brothers. And then there's the Rick Krasinskis of the world.
Right. I've played with Rick.
Cousins.
They're cousins.
Cousin, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the deal with music in your family? Were your parents musical or?
No. I think my grandpa Andalina, I hear, had played clarinet.
Okay.
And I actually have his music stand from Italy in my recording studio. Wow. So he brought so that's my remembrance of my grandpa Andalina. So as far as I can tell, that's where the talent came from my mom's side. But Billy was the one that, got us all started. He was the oldest.
He is the oldest. That's what I was going to ask.
Oldest.
So you're the middle?
I'm the middle.
All right.
Dave's the youngest.
And he's a guitar player.
Yeah.
So did you ever play guitar, or did you start with drums? Or
I started with bass.
You'd start with bass.
That was my one. That's been my one true love for 40-something years.
So you're in a family with two guitar players.
Yeah.
How did you choose to pick up the bass?
I just remember I was, of course, back in the day, Osiki's was around, and Bill would bring home these Fender Flyers from Osiki's. And I was just fascinated by the pictures of the Fender basses.
Yeah.
I mean, they just look so glossy and shiny.
Right.
I don't know. And I figured, well, if Dave's going to play guitar and Bill's a guitar player, well, why not play bass?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a conscious thing. I think it was really the Fender Flyers that, with all the beautiful pictures of the basses, that drew me to the instrument.
And it's ironic. I always think of you as a Rickenbacker guy.
Yeah. So, it's funny. My first bass. So, if I go way back to when I started playing. So, Bill, he was in a band called the Living Dead Band.
Yeah.
Like in the 70s.
Right. Yeah,
right?
I've heard of them.
And he was working at Marine Bank, quit his job, going to go on the road, be a millionaire. And, Living Dead Band was like makeup. This was the Kiss days.
Right.
Where there were like all kinds of bands that put the makeup on, Snowmen, and so they went on the road, starved, My favorite memory was I was sitting at the table with my mother and Bill's wife, and they had just done this huge Canadian tour. And they were just notorious. I mean, I think it was the typical rock and roll lifestyle. So they weren't really concerned with making money. I think they might have, but they spent more than they. So he came back from this 3-week Canadian tour, and his wife asked him, well, how much money did you make? And he said $5.
Oh my God.
He had $5 in his wallet. And so my parents didn't want me to have anything to do with music. But thankfully, my sister took pity on me and bought me my first bass from Osiki's.
Oh, okay.
Which was an Ibanez Flying V.
Oh, wow.
Bass.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't still have that bass?
I got rid of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a stellar instrument by any means, but I will never. And actually, the Rick that I used to play in the '80s, I had traded that too as well. And you should never get rid of instruments. Amplifiers, stuff like that, like who cares? But instruments, I did get rid of the Ibanez.
Did you go to a Fender then, or?
Actually, I still have. When I was 16, my parents bought me my first Rick.
Okay.
Right, and then a couple years after that, I had a friend show up to my basement with a Fender P bass. He's like, "Hey, I got my hands on this bass. Do you want it? $90."
Oh, geez.
I'm like, have to have it. Ran up the stairs to my mom and said, "Can I please have 90?" I don't know where he got the bass.
Yeah.
I don't question that. But she gave me the $90, and I played that thing for 30 years.
Wow.
And I still have it. It's a 1960. It's probably worth actually, my first Cherry Bomb gig, I played the 66 P bass.
Wow. Worth more than $90.
It's worth probably $10,000 because
right.
it's in really good shape. That thing is just amazing. It's an amazing instrument.
So at 16, you have two basses.
Yeah.
One's a Rick, one's a P bass.
Yeah.
And when did you start playing? How old were you?
So I think it was the summer before 8th grade. So I was probably like 13,
okay. All right.
14, and that's all I wanted to do.
Even then?
Actually, so back then they had a deal at Osiki's. You could get 8 weeks of free lessons. And so those were the only lessons I ever had in my entire life.
Okay.
Music lessons.
Who was that? Who taught?
Preston.
Preston Lindy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Preston was my teacher. And that started out okay. But my dad wasn't going to pay for anything after the 8 weeks. And I didn't really like lessons. And anyway, it was too much like school.
Sure. Right.
And so basically I learned how to play the bass by learning like the first 4 Rush albums.
Right. Yeah. Easy stuff.
Actually, I did. I learned how to play bass, drums, and guitar by learning the first 4 Rush albums.
Okay.
They were my teachers.
I was going to say, how did the drums even fit in? I mean,
I used to beat on chairs and stuff.
Okay.
And actually, my mom bought me my first drum kit, which I still have.
Really?
There was a gospel church on like Washington, and there's an ad in the paper, $100 for this drum kit. A 4-piece kit, and I love drums, love Ringo, love playing. And bass players and drummers, this, it's kind of like the same thing.
Sure. Right. Right. Yeah.
I think, most bass players want to be drummers anyway.
Okay.
So you can get all your frustrations out.
Yeah, right.
Of playing with bad drummers. But I had the drum kit and taught myself how to play drums. Actually, I had a real good friend of mine who took lessons, and he showed me a couple things like about 4-way independence, stuff like that, the basics. But I just put the record on, played the record.
Yeah.
My other huge influence that I learned a lot from, there was a band called Flash back in the days. I call them as, I think one of the guys from Yes was in the band.
Yeah. They played
I call
at
them
Gannon.
Poor Man. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Poor Man's Yes.
Yeah, right.
But they were a great prog rock band, and their bass player was Ray Bennett, the most amazing tone. He played a Rick.
Oh, okay.
Played a Rick with a pick. And believe it or not, years later, I was putting songs out. I can't remember what the platform was back then, but I made a comment on Facebook about Ray Bennett being one of my major influences. And he pinged me.
Wow.
He's like, "Hey, I just saw I Googled my name and it came up on your page.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thanks for the kind words." And so I became like Facebook friends with Ray Bennett.
Yeah.
And so they had this album called Out of Our Hands, and it's one of the greatest prog rock albums ever. And the sound of his Rick on that album,
all right,
it's like a total buzzsaw. So I messaged him, I'm like, "Ray, how did you get that sound out of your Rick?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Plugged it direct into the board, tons of compression and mid-range."
Wow. No amp, nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. So, that's basically how I got started.
Is he still playing, by the way?
I've kind of lost track of him.
Yeah.
He had been doing some solo things. There was some noise about a Flash reunion. And
I was going to say, I'd be interested to know.
I think I was
happened.
friends with 3 of the 4 members of Flash at one point on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, I don't think they're doing a lot these days, but.
And so at your family events, you've got two guitarists. If Rick's there, you got a drummer. I mean, did you guys ever talk shop, or did you ever jam together as young kids, or?
I think David and I probably did, because we were only like maybe 16 months apart.
Oh, okay.
So we're both hanging around in the basement.
But Bill's much older, or
Bill is about 9 years older than
gotcha.
me.
Right.
But actually, that was, the first band I was ever in was Livewire.
Yeah.
Right.
John Rainey,
Mark Nelson, John Plaskevich, and
I'm
myself.
glad you said John's last name. I didn't know how to say it.
Yeah, I used to play my Black Rick. So my brother he had a double stack high wide guitar amp that I used to play my Rick through. And he would take it on the road, and they had this big truck, and he'd put the amp in the back of the truck, and all the knobs were broken off of it.
Oh.
So I guess they just turned everything up to 10.
Yeah, right.
And left it. So if I wanted to change anything, I had to stick a nail in the potentiometer and change it.
Great.
But yeah, that was a really fun, that was like my first playing out band, played the Summer Arts Festival.
Yeah.
It didn't last that long.
I mean, this is 76, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, 70, and first encounter with John Rainey?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, how did that all thing come about? I mean, John's a legend.
The girl that I was dating at the time was friends with either John Rainey or so whatever, and she's like, hey, I know this great bass player. You got to... So that's how the connection was made.
Oh, okay.
John was a wild man.
Yeah?
I mean, purportedly, he always said he was Leslie West's cousin. I don't know if that's true, but...
Kind of looks, yeah.
I mean, he was a great guitar player,
Yeah.
even back then. And, it's funny, those photos of us playing the Arts Festival, we're both playing through, like, double stack amps.
Right.
That's where I met Mark Nelson.
Right.
Mark's
Mark's on episode, or season 1, and he talks a little bit about...
Yeah.
Livewire and
oh my gosh, it was so much fun.
What music? What type of stuff?
I mean, it was hard rock,
Hard
like
rock.
Scorpions, maybe Judith Rush, all that kind of stuff.
Sure,
from back then. It didn't last very long.
Okay.
But I think my brother Bill had come to see one of our shows, and so what happened with him, his wife had finally got fed up with him coming home from the road with $5. So he ended up leaving the Living Dead band. And wasn't doing anything. I think he came to one of our Livewire shows, and he basically poached me and Mark.
Became Griffin?
To become Griffin.
Right.
And listen, I always idolized my brother. He was a rock star from the time I was little.
Yeah.
So for me, me and Mark, I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. I think he was 26, 27.
And then Dave's a year younger than you. I mean, you guys are young.
Yeah. So, for me to be able to play with Bill.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a prodigy back then.
Sure.
All I remember about playing bass, it seemed to me like I picked it up and I knew how to do it.
You make it look that way. Yeah.
But anyway, I got the chance to play with him, which was like awesome. Talk about being starstruck. But that was a really cool band. We had a lot of originals. Some I re-recorded.
Oh, really?
I think it was 2 years ago. It's on my Spotify page.
Okay, good.
So we had a bunch of originals, and I'm like, Bill, man, we should like re-record this stuff, because I had old cassette tapes of live recordings, like an infamous one from the Girard Hotel.
Okay.
I had all 4 sets.
Yeah.
So I had all the songs on it. And I'm like, man, because I have this beautiful studio. I'm like, this stuff is so heavy. We got to do it.
I was going to say, what type of music was it?
It was hard rock.
It was.
It was like, we played like Judas Priest and Ted Nugent, bunch of originals.
But your originals were the
Hard
same
rock.
vein. Okay. All right. Interesting.
Reminds me of Deep Purple.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, I had 5 songs in mind, and Bill doesn't have recording equipment, and he lives in Conneaut. So what I did was, he has an iPad.
Okay.
And so I mapped out like the basic tracks on my iPad, and I gave him an interface, and I said, plug your guitar into this thing and just play.
Yeah. So that's how
That's
you read it.
all he did.
Wow.
I mean, he recorded, every song he did like a couple rhythm guitars, a couple lead guitars.
Okay.
And it's like this one, we had a song called All the Time, and it had a very specific, it's kind of like a country rockish kind of vibe. Very specific guitar solo. And when I listened to his part, I'm like, he's playing it exactly the same way he did 40 years ago.
That's awesome.
And when he and some of them were really heavy and required like a lot of heavy duty guitar playing. He's like, I don't really play like that anymore.
Yeah.
Because he was in country bands.
Oh, okay.
In the latter stages of career, and he wasn't like a shredder anymore.
Right.
I really wanted, so he did his stuff at home, and I brought it back into the studio. I really wanted Mark Nelson to do the drums.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get the technology together.
He's in Colorado.
Yeah, in theory, he should have been able to do it. He has a V drum kit. He just couldn't make the technology work.
Got it.
So I ended up doing the drums and the bass, used my Rick, which sounds like amazing on the record, and the vocals. But the funny part about that was I was listening to this one song from the Girard Hotel recording, and it was like this bluesy thing with a beautiful guitar part. I thought it was like Grand Funk or something.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find it anywhere. I was searching. It was called "Ever Since You Went Away" was the name of the song.
Okay.
And I'm searching all over Grand Funk, and like I couldn't find it. So I called Bill up. I'm like, Bill, who wrote this tune? And I sang some of it over the phone for him. He's like, I wrote that. So it was an original.
Got it.
That he actually had played in. He was in a band called Armageddon way back in the day with Jack Bernard.
Okay, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Jack
Who
was
also
in the
was
Living
in
Dead
Living
band.
Dead. Right, yeah.
And it's just a wonderful song.
Huh.
But that's the thing about this stuff is like, well, who wrote that? I did.
Well, we'll make sure we include a link to your Spotify and all those songs. So, Griffin, does it stay around a long time?
I mean, not really. I think what happened was probably 2, 3, 4. I mean, it was probably like 77 to 80, maybe 80.
Okay.
And Bill started having kids, and that put a halt to his music career for a while.
So do you then stay with Mark and go into the Visitors?
Yes, the Visitors was the next thing.
And Dave joined you?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's when my parents bought Norb's Bar.
That was one of my questions.
Yes.
All right. You're wearing your Norb shirt
I
today.
have
That's classic. Love it. Yeah. I was going to ask you, because obviously people that know you and your brother. They think of the Bedrocks. They think of Norbs and everything. How was that? What were your folks doing prior to that?
So my dad was the chief city electrician.
Okay.
And it was his lifelong dream to have a corner bar.
Oh, okay. All right, got it.
And so, and my Aunt Millie, she was like the queen of the local Erie bar scene. She had like taverns upon taverns. At one point, I think she owned 3 of the taverns on like 22nd and Parade Street, So she had owned a lot of taverns. So my dad partnered with my Aunt Millie. It was called the Diamond Cafe.
At first?
Before my parents got it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so Dad realized his lifelong dream. And you know what, Chip? One of these days, I keep telling myself I'm going to write a Norb's book.
Yeah.
Because the stories I have from that place it was just a fabulous time.
I was reading an article that Dave Richards wrote, back in the 80s when he first came to town about, how he loved Norb so much and obviously going to see you guys. But he was talking about the vibe. He was talking about the people, and he said, my wife and I were from out of town. We didn't know a lot of people, and this place was so non-pretentious, and and the beer was cheap, but you could saddle up and just have a friend by the end of the night after just chatting with people and everything. And then obviously the music scene, was way eclectic.
Yeah, and I think I remember the first time I met Dave.
Oh, really?
They had just moved here.
Yeah.
And I think Norb's was probably one of the first places he went to.
Yeah.
And, it's crazy. I remember, my parents had the place. It wasn't too long, maybe less than a year. And we had formed the Visitors.
What, had the Diamond Lounge or Cafe had live music?
I don't think so. It was your typical shot in a beer. Bar. Oh, it was, I remember, I'll never forget the first time I walked into the place. I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
And it was bad. I mean, it was disgusting. And so, it was my brothers and I and my sister. The whole family got recruited to clean it up.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad gave David and I, our first job was to chisel the old tile floor off.
Oh, geez.
That had been there probably since World War I or something.
Right.
Not a fun job.
Yeah.
But once we got it rehabilitated, I remember begging my parents, because we had the band and we were just kids.
That's what I wondered.
18 years old. David was 17.
Did they initiate it or did you?
I did. I'm like, Mom, Dad, let us play.
Yeah.
Let us play at the bar, And so, they finally agreed. And I think might have been the first time they let us do it, might have been a Saturday. But then so many people came, they're like, okay. So we'd play every Friday.
Were you the first band ever to play there?
Yeah.
And what was it? Was it the Visitors?
That was the Visitors.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
And that kicked off the whole Norbs ago. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
Jimmy Rosenthal,
sure.
He's quite the, front man. People love him.
Right.
And like all our friends used to come, and most of them are underage.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But, the funny thing about Norb, and I think Norbs is, I think you were going there, and I think this always, made Dave Richards laugh. You'd be sitting there and there'd be all these kids in there listening to bands, and then there'd be the winos sitting at the bar.
Yeah.
And they never caused any trouble.
Right.
I mean, they liked the music. They kept it themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they all looked forward to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Visitors didn't last that long either, just a couple years. But that really started the scene in Erie.
Yeah. The original.
The original, new wave scene.
Yeah, because that's what you guys were playing, right?
Yeah.
Originals.
We were playing originals.
But
we did covers too.
Oh,
so
okay.
Police and, what's the romantic?
Oh, the romantic. Sure, yeah.
We did
stuff.
all U2.
Yeah.
We did all of the hits, and the music scene in general was going through this massive transformation.
Yeah, right.
Because I was coming off of hard rock.
Yeah.
And when we first started playing, we were doing a mix of hard rock and these new songs. Jimmy's like, that ain't gonna work. We got to go one way or the other.
Yeah, right.
And we went with the new music, and it just took off like lightning.
Who all was in the Visitors?
So that was David, my brother Dave, and me, Mark Nelson, and Jimmy Rosenthal.
Okay, that's it. Just the four of you.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
And I think either Mark or Chris Vrenna told me, because I interviewed Chris for a newspaper article about going there playing underage, because I think Chris played there in the Eyelids or somebody else.
Oh my gosh.
And exactly what you said. He said, oh, you know what? One of them was telling me that one of those winos, regulars, was Marjorie Deal Armstrong, who used to hang out there.
I'm not surprised by that. I don't recall ever meeting Marjorie, but she seems like the kind of crazy person that would be.
But it might have been Mark who was saying, her and Rothstein, were there, and they were regulars, and they'd meet, and they just chatted them up, and then he's like, well, I have to go up and play. I'm actually in the band, and I think it might have been Vrenna who said his dad had to drop him off, he was underage and everything. And
we're another band that I just loved. There was a bunch of kids. They were called The Squat.
Wow, I've never heard
and they
that.
were maybe 15, but that was the awesome thing we these guys would open up, and I think this was into the Bedrocks days.
Okay, all right.
These kids would be like, hey, I got a band. Don't know how. They probably called my sister.
Yeah,
me.
that's what
and
I was
we're like, sure, you can come play.
Okay, I wondered how you got those
But
gigs.
the Squad, they played all originals, and they had the best songs, and they could barely play.
Wow.
Right? Could barely play. But they wrote the greatest songs with the greatest parts, and I still have an old cassette tape of The Squat.
Do you know anybody in the band?
Actually, I can't remember his name. He's still playing. I think he's the guitar player in the Oneaters.
The guitar player. I don't know the guitar player.
Yeah. I'm so bad with names. I'll have to look it up. He's I'm still friends with him on Facebook. He's still playing.
All right.
But and then but the scene, back then all these bands started happening. The Ray Guns. Underground System was like an awesome band with
Underground System.
Dave Waldrop.
Oh yeah, Dave
was
Waldrop.
the guitar player.
Him.
He went
Sure.
on to like play surf music. in California.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
his Vultures. His band was the Vultures. Yeah.
And they were like kind of a goth, kind of a. Oh my God, they were so good.
And it always reminds me of a place where there's like 3 bands on the bill for the night, right? I mean,
usually.
And they were always. I mean, what were you getting paid back then? Even from your dad.
So we played, like I said, the Visitor, and even into the Bedrocks. We would play every Friday.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
And we were paid $20 a guy.
Okay. All right.
But back then,
84, 85,
that's
right?
a couple cases of beer.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
And plus all the free subs and stuff of my mom's that we could eat. But.
And on one of the most peculiar angled stages that the town has.
Well, because the place wasn't very big.
Right.
And so, my dad decided to build a stage, but he had to leave room for the ladies to get
into the door.
The ladies' room, which was tucked back behind the right side of the stage,
Yep.
which was always cool. We could always wave to the girlies while they were waiting in line for the ladies' room. And, I mean, it wasn't big.
It wasn't big, yeah.
It wasn't big.
I think I played there once for someone, and I always remember, this is the stage?
Yeah. My only regret is, and of course, I think we had, when Norbs had their 25th anniversary, the Bedrocks came back and reformed.
Yeah.
Which, again, the crazy thing about this music in general is, we hadn't played together like probably for 15 years.
Okay.
Get together in my basement, boom. When we did the show for Dave Richards' retirement party, one practice, boom.
That's it. So, how does it happen that the Visitors eventually evolve into the Bedrocks?
Well, before it was the Bedrocks.
The KG Beats.
Yeah,
right?
the KG Beats happened after the Visitors.
All right.
And that was Dave and me. A guy named Joe Washek played drums.
Okay.
And Jimmy Cuneo was with us initially. Didn't last very long, and then it just became Dave and me and Joe.
Was that all original too? Or
so back then, it's funny. Songwriters, the life of a songwriter is very brief, right? If you look take Paul McCartney, had a great run with the Beatles, right? After that, it was like he'd write one good song like every 10 years.
Gotcha.
So I was like in my early 20s, and I was very prolific. Not all my songs were great.
Cranking them out, though.
We had My Mommy Was a Commie, which was an icon.
Right.
And I wrote this great song called Pizza and Beer, which people still talk about. But you hear Ed Sheeran. I saw Ed Sheeran special, and he went back to this school in his hometown, this music class. He's like, write a song a day from start to finish. Doesn't matter if it's good or not. Get all your bad songs out of your system.
Yeah.
And back then, I used to write a ton of songs.
Okay.
Some of them were good.
You were the primary songwriter.
I did 90% of it. I think once we hit the Bedrocks, we used to just kind of jam a lot in Norb's kitchen. That was our rehearsal.
Wait, at your house?
At the bar. We practiced either in the basement.
I
think we practiced in the kitchen.
Okay.
And we would just kind of noodle around until something sounded good.
Okay.
But Dave doesn't write songs, and even to this day, he was like, I don't know how to do it.
And playing in band with your brother, I mean, I'm sure that there's that brother rivalry, and
he drove me nuts for like 20 years.
Is that what it was?
Even into Joe Rockett, because he always plays too loud.
Okay.
Guitar players, they're always too loud. Right. You've been around this, right? I can't hear it.
Yeah. All right.
But a great singer and a great guitar player.
Absolutely. Yeah. Back up 1 second. What is the KG Beats?
So,
what does that stand for?
I think it was Jimmy Cuneo's idea.
Okay.
And it was capital K, capital G, capital B.
Yeah.
This was there was a bunch of KGB noise in the news back then.
Gotcha.
So we thought KG Beats would be a nice play on words.
All right.
And again, we continued with all of the 80s stuff. Played a lot of originals though.
Even in the KG Beats.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So how does Ed, how do I say his last name? Bozak?
Yeah.
How does he come into the picture as far as for the Bedrocks?
We auditioned him. So
we
put an ad in the paper.
Well, you were a big deal at the time.
We auditioned, I think, 3 guys. And, the other 2 just didn't fit for whatever reason. But as soon as I played with Ed, Ed learned how to play drums in the military.
Oh, okay.
I believe. So he was very technically sound.
All right.
Right? He did all that rudimentary stuff that I can't do because I just beat the crap out of my drum kit. But he was a very, very sound drummer and very musical.
Yeah.
He listened and played the parts, never made a mistake.
Interesting.
Ever. I do have to say this, Chip, though, because my wife will kill me if I don't say this. I actually met my wife at Norb's.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
That's a great...
So we've been married 37 years.
Congrats. All right.
And my dad actually, played matchmaker.
You're playing a gig, she's there?
Well, so she was a nurse at St. Vincent's at the time.
Okay.
And all of the nurses would come over for happy hour.
Oh.
In their whites. This is back when they used to wear whites.
Yeah.
And I think I was rehearsing in the kitchen, and it was summer, and it was hot, and I came out to get a drink of water, and I was all sweaty. And Amy was sitting next to my dad at the bar, and she's like, "Who's that?" He's like, "That's my son. Maybe you should come back later."
Yeah.
And I met her that night.
Wow.
And we stayed together for 37 years.
All right.
We will be together forever, but it's been 37 years.
And this is a little fast forward in our story, but how long did Norb stay open?
I think it was 25 years. Maybe it hit 30.
Okay.
But then, with the chains coming in, downtown being what it was back then, for one reason or another, that was it.
Younger folks listening to this, if there are any,
probably
don't even know what Norb's is.
My only regret was, and actually, we used to take my kids there. So we started playing. My parents love country music.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this.
I mean, and I like country. I like the old country.
Yeah.
And some of my earliest memories are my mom blasting Ring of Fire on the stereo while she's cleaning house.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But my dad was on Billy and David and I forever to play country music. And so, finally we gave in. Billy wasn't doing anything. And I think it was Bill and me and a guy named Mark Amneski, who's still playing.
Okay, yeah.
That I think Mark Nelson was actually in the first version of the country band. We called it the Country Winos.
Right.
And we'd play Saturday afternoons at Norb's at 3:00.
Because your mom was there.
Yeah,
right?
they wanted us to do Saturday afternoons because nothing was happening.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was nuts. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Shots flying, people dancing.
So people picked up on it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was big. And then that morphed. I don't remember how it morphed into Ramrod and the Cowpokers.
Oh.
But that was the next iteration. I think by then we were doing Billy. That's when Achy Breaky Heart was big.
Oh,
I remember playing Achy Breaky Heart in Ramrod and the Cowpokers. And Alan Jackson and all those guys were big. So we were doing the newer country. So for whatever reason, we changed the name to Ramrod and the Cowpokers.
And you're still playing bass?
I'm playing bass, which I love playing bass to country tunes.
Oh, okay.
Because there's so much room. I'm a fabulous walking bass player.
Yeah.
And you can walk the heck out of country tunes.
Gotcha.
And so, those songs were just so much fun to play. And it was so much fun, so crazy.
A little different than Echo and the Bunnymen or REM.
Oh, yeah, Echo and the Bunnymen.
Stuff like that you were playing at that time.
Yeah.
Probably in the Bedrocks, right? Yeah.
Right.
And so the Bedrocks really take off and you get a following. You're together for 4 years, 5 years,
Something
whatever it
like
is.
that.
Yeah. So tell me, aside from Norb's, where else were you playing?
Well, there was I'm thinking, because this was so long ago.
Yeah.
We probably played the Winery. I think there was a place called the Landmark.
Oh, yeah, the Landmark, yeah.
It's called the Landfill.
Wait, where was the Landmark? On Asbury or no?
26th Street, maybe?
I think 26th Street somewhere. Yeah.
We never really traveled. Of course, we had the infamous gig opening up for the Stabilizers at the Hilton.
I was going to ask you about that.
Holy cow.
And first of all, before we get to that, didn't you have another guy? Who is Knobs?
That was our sound man.
What's his real name?
Dave Heron.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, so we used to call him Knobs.
Right.
And, he's very Irish. And so I started calling him Knobs Herringbone from Scotland.
Okay.
And we all had stage names.
Oh, you did?
Back in the day.
All right. In the Bedrocks.
Ed was Bam Bam Bozak. Jimmy Rosenthal gave my brother Dave like the greatest stage name. It was Ephraim V.
Nice.
And he said it was because he went to the eye doctor and he couldn't tell F from V.
Okay. All right. And what was yours?
I don't know if I can say this, but my name was Tony Boners.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can say that.
Yeah. Jimmy Rosenthal used to say former porn star Tony Boners.
Nice. All right.
I don't know. Oh yeah. And Knobs, he was our sound man forever. Really good friend of ours. We went to high school at
that's
Tech
what I
Memorial
wondered.
together. And he was like the king of the Roland Space Echo.
Oh.
So we had a Roland Space Echo back in the days, and he just, at key points in the songs, he would crank
it up.
And
yeah.
I had that thing forever.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
I actually sold it on eBay a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
Because I got sick and tired of it. I have no use for that.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm like, let me get it to somebody who's going to use it.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway.
So the Hilton gig, I was there. A lot of people were there. I mean, for those of you who don't remember the Stabilizers, they had 2 songs on the radio. They were in MTV. Dave Christensen and Rich Nevins, I think, and some local guys played with them originally, but they went out to California and cut the album.
Yep.
They come back to Erie and they play this big welcome home gig at the Hilton. How did that even come about for you guys being the opener for them? Do you remember?
So I think Dave used to come to Norb's.
He did.
I don't think I can't remember if the Stabilizers ever played there. I think they were too big for Norb's.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, just.
But he liked the band. And when they knew where they come, I got a call from him, and he's like, "Hey, do you guys want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Oh, okay. So he called you. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was as simple as that. And it was.
Was it one simple thing?
It was simple for me, but it was like we got to be rock stars for a day.
It was
big stage, big sound,
girls screaming. Yeah,
girls scream. We got rooms.
Did you really steal their keg?
We did. Our friend Lonnie Wright, he was roadie for us, for me and my brother Bill, even back into the Griffin days.
Oh, okay.
And he was a sound man.
Great.
And so I think we invited him to the show as our security guy or something, or to carry, maybe even to roadie. And the Stabilizers all had rooms. And all the record company guys were there, right? Yeah. And so I thought, here's my big chance. I get to talk to this guy from whatever it was, CBS, whatever.
Right.
And I handed him a cassette tape with 4 of our songs on it. Gave him the spiel. Of course, I don't think he ever listened to it.
Sure, right.
But we were all partying in the Stabilizers room. And, we were veteran partiers from Norb's.
Oh, yeah?
And so back then, like I never partied when I played. I partied after I was done at 2 a.m.
Okay. All right. Great.
We were used to staying up late, and so the Stabilizers all went to bed early. I think we did have a room. And so they all went to bed, and we're sitting in their suite, and I'm like, Lonnie, can you take their keg down to our room? So Lonnie, he was a big dude.
Oh, okay.
Right? He was a big dude. He puts it on his shoulder and is walking down the hall of the Hilton with the Stabilizers keg. And then we probably stayed up the rest of the night. How'd
the set go?
It was awesome.
I mean, I remember becoming a Bedrocks fan that night.
Yeah.
That
was right after, I think, our
first tape came out.
Yeah. And so all of those songs were new. We were really excited about them, played most of them. I mean, I thought the set was fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. The TV, you can still find the TV spot.
I just watched it. Very classic Erie TV. They misspell your name with a Z.
I had my cool Jim Jones glasses on.
Yeah. You know what? I'll put a link to that in your episode.
You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that was so cool. That was so cool.
I bet, man. So after that, are you thinking? I mean, because you really weren't, like you said, a traveling band.
No.
You know, I mean, were you having ideas of, we might make it?
I had hopes that they'd listen to it and say, well, you know how record companies are.
Yeah.
The Erie formula.
Yeah, right.
But we weren't really a band like the Stabilizers.
Not at all.
Like we were more like Echo and the Bunnymen. I was listening to a lot of Gang of Four at the time.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So like, edgier stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And, not real hooky, not real poppy. And so, obviously nothing ever came out of it. So,
but at the same time, have you started playing drums with the Weathermen? On the side?
All throughout. So when the Bedrocks was playing, so there was a band called the Pinkertons.
Okay.
And that was the precursor to the Weathermen. And that was Eddie Samford, who still, in my mind, is one of like the greatest songwriters I've ever worked with.
Okay.
He is the master of the 3-chord song.
All right. Yeah.
The Pinkertons would play. No. It was Eddie and Jim Stephan, Mark Borzon, and Denny. I'm friends with him on Facebook. It was so long ago. Played drums.
Okay.
And then that turned into the Weathermen.
Okay. All right.
And I think I was the Weathermen's drummer.
Yeah.
Like right from, and I remember, I know it was around 1985 because I have a picture of myself playing drums, and I was tan because I just got back from my honeymoon.
Is this your first band you've ever played drums in?
I think live, but again, I played all the time.
Yeah.
So I knew how to do it. And that was the first band I played drums in, and I loved playing with Eddie.
And you were doing both bands at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Weathermen would open up for the Bedrocks.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. And what was that type of stuff that they were playing?
I mean, we always, it was like 60s garage band.
Okay.
Like we played Paul Revere and the Raiders, all stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Monkeys.
So it was mostly covers?
It was, Eddie, we had a lot of great songs.
Yeah, I know you said he was a big...
Yeah. So it was covers and originals, but, the covers and... Eddie was a big, like, Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart fan.
Okay.
Like the iconic songwriters of the 60s who wrote half of the songs of the 60s.
Gotcha.
And so we did all of those tunes, but it was like all that garagey stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the songs he wrote sounded like those 60s tunes.
They did. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and that eventually morphed into the Shrugs.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, so
that was Bill Cotter.
Bill Cotter.
That still to this day one of my favorite bands.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Bill Cotter, Bradley Harrington, who I love so much, great bass player.
Yeah. Wow.
Played in the Girl Scouts, the Frenchmen,
right?
All those kinds of bands, and of course Eddie.
And so you're still playing drums and loving it.
I'm loving it.
And the Shrugs, you last into the 90s, right?
Yeah, it lasted quite a while. We had a really good run.
Yeah.
And then I started having kids.
That's okay. That's the point that
That's where my hiatus from live playing started.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's a heck of a lot. Favorite gigs over the years in those early days? I mean, aside from the Hilton gig, I mean...
the Hilton was great. Early days. Those Fridays at Norb's. I have videotape of shows.
Oh, really?
Still.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was packed, and people would be like new wave dancing, and those country Saturdays were very near. I have recordings of some of that stuff too.
Okay.
All right. And that was all good. We never really had any big memorable shows. I'm trying to think.
Like festivals, Erie Days.
I think we did.
Like
we did. The Bedrocks did play "We Love Erie Days" a couple times.
Okay.
So that's in fact one of the pics I sent you was from. We Love Erie Days.
And you played the Men Without Work concert.
That was. I have audio from that show.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So that was a great. Fun time.
So the Generic Beats, hot at the time.
Yeah.
You're playing with them. Mm-hmm. The Scam, Jack Stevenson's first band. The Raleighs, I didn't know them.
Yeah. All Norb's bands.
All Norb's bands? Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so what was going, I don't know if it was Raven Sound back then, but Keith, we had just did our album with Keith Vasheko and John Mazza.
Yep.
And they were doing the sound, and they had, they put mic splitters on everything, and they had a board, and I think it was just 2-track. Back behind the stage, but they recorded the whole thing.
The whole concert?
Yeah, and it sounds great.
Really?
Yeah, so I still have all of that stuff.
Okay, yeah.
There's not a lot of effects on the voice. It's pretty dry, but it sounds like, I mean, listen to how we played back then.
Right.
And we were good.
It was
just kids.
St. John's Lutheran.
Yeah.
Inside, outside?
It was inside, like a gym.
Like a gym, yeah. A good crowd. I don't even.
It was a great crowd.
Yeah,
great response. Yeah, it was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, those types of big concerts, or like you said, benefits, or We Love Erie Days. I often think people remember those things, but when your parents own a bar and that's your house, you're the house band. And that had to be the best place for all those memories.
Yeah, and so when we were doing the country stuff on Saturday, that's, I think, eventually we had all 3 boys, and they were little, my kids.
Okay.
And so my wife would bring them down to Norb's for the show. And they had pinball machines back then. So first thing my dad would do was give each one of them a roll of quarters.
Okay.
To keep them busy.
Sure, right.
For a couple of hours. But just this, I love this story because it's such a Norb's thing. I think after we got done playing one day, I'm sitting at a table having a pop with my dad, and my son Nick, he was probably like 8 at the time, and I look over at the bar. He's sitting at the bar. There was an older guy named Dennis. He had to be like in his 60s.
Okay.
And Nick is sitting next to Dennis, and they're having this animated conversation, and their hands are flying up in the air. And I'm thinking to myself, what could those two possibly be talking about?
Right.
But I knew he was harmless. But, my kids got so much from meeting people,
sure,
I think, that helped them later in life.
Right. Good socialization
skills. Yeah, but that was the kind of place it was.
Yeah.
What could those two possibly be talking about?
What is that building now? Is it empty?
I think it's somebody built apartments upstairs. I've heard that they never did anything with the bar.
Okay, all right.
But I think they have people living in apartments upstairs.
Did it become anything after your folks sold it?
Nope.
No,
it stayed empty until somebody bought it.
Got it. Okay.
Rehabilitated it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you could probably make a few bucks selling those shirts, the Norb's Bar shirts,
It's vintage.
That's right. It's vintage.
Best drinks in town.
Very nice. Love that tagline. Well, this was great. This is great. And like I said, I'll include as many links as we can. You've been prolific in your writing even since then on Spotify. There's a ton of stuff on there. You've got your new studio, Tony. Do you call it Tony K or just K Studio?
It's Studio K.
Studio K, all right.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you're looking for a new studio to record at, all the latest, coolest stuff, great
I get to record my kids.
Okay.
My 2 younger boys are wonderful songwriters. My son John just released a 7-song EP.
Oh, so they got the bug.
John is in that prolific stage where he's writing. He's 28.
What do they play?
His album, this one is acoustic and voice.
Okay.
It's a very broody kind of a thing, though. And,
all right.
But it's so, so I'm his producer. So I fix things up. I make it sound good. I mix and master. Throw a couple of harmonies on here and there. But yeah, one of my great joys in life is getting to work on my kids' stuff.
Do either of them play bass?
They can, but right now I think both of them are primarily guitar players.
Guitar, okay.
And all programming. Right. They were doing programming way back before it was a thing.
Sure, right. Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, very cool. Well, I appreciate you being on today with us, and I'll include all those links. You're going to send me some more pictures.
Yep.
This was awesome.
Hey, thank you really much for having me, Chip.
Thanks,
it's awesome.
All right. Thanks for listening, and special thanks to the JPT Foundation for sponsoring the podcast and for letting us use their events hall once a month for our free music night featuring the fabulous Leftovers. They're a band of longtime Erie musicians who play for an hour and then are followed by 2 hours of an open mic. All the proceeds for the event go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. The music nights are held the first Tuesday of the month from 6 to 9 at the Events Hall, which is located on West 38th Street in the plaza right next to Our Lady of Peace Church. And finally, for information on what bands and musicians are playing in Erie and the surrounding area, please check out Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast and webpage. Jack gives you all the details you need each week on who is playing where. That's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast. So, I'm Chip Shell, and I thank you again for listening to the Erie Music History Podcast.